So I was recently in a debate with a fellow NBA fan, and he said something many of you have said in the past. He said, "I don't get why everyone hates on KD for his decision when LeBron did it first." That's when I decided to make this video. This is a narrative that needs to die fast. LeBron's decision to join Miami was a huge deal. I'm not denying that. LeBron, Wade, and Bosh was definitely a super team, but it wasn't the first super team. What it was the first super team to be organized and created by the players. Never before had 3 of the top 10 players in the league all signed with the same team in free agency. They discussed this, and they made the move together. Think about the great super teams of the past. Magic and Bird were drafted, Jordan and Pippen were drafted, Shaq was signed but Kobe was traded for, Allen and Garnett were traded for. It was organizations that created these super teams, so in that sense, LeBron and Miami was the first player-arranged super team. It was new and uncharted territory and honestly changed the league and even further empowered the players. LeBron was even confident enough to famously predict multiple championships for his new Miami team.
Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7.
You could see that this team was potentially a dynasty the day it formed. With that being said, this wasn't a sure thing. Team chemistry is always a factor. They didn't have much depth on the roster. They had a new and unproven head coach, and almost the entire roster was basically learning to play together for the first time. That's a much different situation than an already established 73-9 team that recently won a championship, simply adding a former MVP in the prime of his career. KD and his team had also just been eliminated from the playoffs by this 73-9 team that he was joining. An elimination that may not have occurred if he hadn't shown up small in games 6 and 7 against the Warriors. Nothing about those details resemble LeBron joining the Miami Heat. Also consider the fact that Miami wasn't just beating everyone on talent alone. When they assembled, they actually had a rough start and faced plenty of trials and challenges. Hell, they didn't even win the championship their first year together. They lost to the Dallas Mavericks in what is now a famous black eye for LeBron's resume. Kevin Durant and Golden State, on the other hand, had no real opposition or trials. I even congratulated the Warriors publicly for winning the NBA championship the day they signed Kevin Durant. That's how obvious this outcome ultimately was. Now I'm going to bring up a point that I never hear anyone else mention, but I really think it exposes the real difference between what KD did and what LeBron did. The one team that LeBron could have joined, and it would have been the same as KD's decision to go to the Warriors, was not the Miami Heat, but actually it was the Boston Celtics. Let's take a moment to look back at LeBron's free agency at the end of the 2010 season and compare LeBron and the Celtics to KD's decision to go to Golden State, because the resemblance is strikingly similar. When LeBron went to Miami, he was building something new. He signed there simultaneously with 2 other prime superstars. Miami was not an already established title contender like the Boston Celtics were. When LeBron could have joined Boston in the summer of 2010, they were a 3-headed monster of a super team that had just won the NBA championship 2 years prior, just like Golden State when Kevin Durant joined. Boston's super team was coming off of a loss in the NBA Finals in an epic 7-game series, just like Golden State was when KD joined. LeBron had just been eliminated from the playoffs by the same Boston Celtics that he could have ultimately joined, just like Kevin Durant was eliminated by the Warriors that he did end up joining. The Boston Celtics had more than just an already established 3-headed monster. They had a deep roster with proven and competent veterans, just like Golden State did. Are you beginning to see how unbelievably similar these situations were? As big as LeBron signing in Miami was, if LeBron did end up joining Boston instead, the response would have been even worse to his decision and would have looked extremely close to how KD was received upon his move to Golden State. Once LeBron was in Miami, they may have been considered favorites, but they weren't just seen as a foregone conclusion that they were going to win the championship. With LeBron in Miami, we knew that they potentially still had to go through the defending champs, Kobe and the Lakers, and the defending Eastern Conference champions, the Boston Celtics. If LeBron had joined Boston, he obviously would have no real threat in the conference because he had just joined them. Could you really see Kobe and the Lakers as a threat to LeBron and Boston when they had just barely squeaked out a 4-point victory in the deciding game of the NBA championship before he joined them? Man, does this sound at all familiar to you? With LeBron and Boston, just like with KD and Golden State, there would have been no real opposition. They would have steamrolled the entire NBA. Almost everyone around the basketball community would have hated them, and everyone would have been simply waiting for that dynasty to split up before their team could have any realistic shot at an NBA championship. That is what it could have been. So essentially, what LeBron did by joining Miami was the first in its own right. But what KD did in joining Golden State, well, that's something else entirely. The King is about to start his 21st season in the NBA, and assuming he continues to play at an elite level, he'll be in some truly uncharted territory. In the history of the NBA, no player has ever made an All-NBA team in their 21st season. In fact, no player has ever averaged more than 8 points in their 21st season. So unless LeBron suddenly has his talent taken by the Monstars, he'll become the first. LeBron is becoming only the 6th player in NBA history to play 21 seasons in the league. The other 5 players were Kevin Garnett, who averaged 3.2 points, Dirk Nowitzki, who averaged 7.3, Vince Carter, who averaged 7.4, Kevin Willis, who averaged 2.4, and Robert Parrish, who averaged 3.7. In case you're wondering, that adds up to a total of only 24 points per game, which means that LeBron could easily outscore the other 5 players combined in their 21st season. If LeBron didn't already have the greatest longevity in the history of the game, he certainly will at the end of this upcoming season. LeBron Ramon James. In many ways, he's proved himself to be the standard of excellence and consistency within the NBA, and in the eyes of some people, he's the greatest basketball player to ever live. So here's the thing. Over 3 years ago, I made a video on this exact topic about LeBron James, breaking down whether or not he's the best ever at his age, which was 35 years old and in his 17th season in the league. My conclusion to that question was that it was ultimately pretty debatable at best. But now, 3 years have passed. LeBron recently wrapped up his 20th season in the NBA at the age of 38. So the question now becomes, was he the best ever at year 20 and at age 38? And how good will he have to be in order to be the best at age 39 and year 21? Well, I'll do my best to answer that as we compare the most long-lasting veteran players in NBA history. First off, let's ask the question if LeBron was the greatest player in his 20th season. In the history of the NBA, a grand total of 10 players have played 20 seasons in the league, and these are the players listed on the screen. Out of these 10 players, only 5 of them played at least 50 games throughout the regular season, and they were LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Dirk Nowitzki, Vince Carter, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Only 3 out of these 10 players were selected as NBA All-Stars, and that was LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and Dirk Nowitzki. Only one of these players earned an All-NBA team selection, and that was LeBron James. Only one of these players averaged at least 25 points per game, and that was LeBron James. Only one of them averaged at least 20, and that was also LeBron. Only 2 players averaged at least 15 points, and they were LeBron and Kobe. Only 1 player shot at least 50% from the field over the course of the season, and that was LeBron James as well. As you can clearly tell by that quick summary, LeBron is completely in a class of his own for players in their 20th season. These were the numbers that he put up over the course of that 20th year, and the player who's likely the closest to him is Kobe Bryant, who averaged far less in pretty much every major category while not being nearly as efficient. In conclusion, without question, LeBron was the greatest 20th season player of all time. But here's the thing. Some of you might say that this isn't necessarily a fair comparison, because LeBron was drafted straight out of high school, which means he got an earlier start to his NBA career, which also means that he's significantly younger than most 20th season players, with the exceptions being Kobe Bryant and Kevin Garnett, who were also drafted straight from high school. So in the spirit of comparative integrity, let's also look at his actual age and see how that stacks up against other greats at that same age. At the beginning of last season, LeBron was 37 years old, and he had his 38th birthday during the season. And that context is extremely important for the comparison. Some people will want to compare LeBron's most recent season to Michael Jordan's first season with the Washington Wizards, since they were both 38 years old at one point during the season. But that's simply a bad faith argument, because LeBron started last season at the age of 37 and it ended at the age of 38, while Michael Jordan's first season in Washington started at the age of 38 and it ended at the age of 39. So that specific comparison will have to wait until LeBron has played in this upcoming season. And trust me, I will make a video on that comparison eventually. Not because I have a dog in the fight, but simply because I like money. So with that being clarified, let's compare LeBron at the age of 38 to the other competitors at the same age. Many of the greatest players of all time didn't play in the NBA until the age of 38. Players like Kobe Bryant, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson all retired before they reached their 38th birthday, while players like Shaquille O'Neal and Hakeem Olajuwon were just playing as a shell of their former selves. Without question, the greatest seasons from players at this age come from the mailman Karl Malone, the captain Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and the big fundamental Tim Duncan. Let's start things off with Duncan. It was the 2013 to 2014 season, and Duncan helped lead his Spurs to a very successful regular season, while putting up about 15 points, 10 rebounds, and 2 blocks on 49% shooting from the field. He did play in 74 of the 82 regular season games, while being a consistently effective presence defensively. Duncan did also play a significant role in the Spurs ultimately winning the NBA championship that season over LeBron and the Miami Heat. Now compare that 38-year-old season to LeBron, and you'll see that James destroys Duncan from the perspective of statistical production in the regular season. With that being said, I would give Duncan the edge defensively. The big fundamental did play in more games, and his team did eventually win the championship, unlike LeBron's Lakers. Even with all that being said, LeBron's edge in production is the kind of gap between an MVP candidate and a second option player. Therefore, I gotta give the overall edge to James at this age. Now let's look at Karl Malone. The Utah power forward put in an all-star effort in the 2001 to 2002 season, while leading his Jazz to an 8-seeded playoff berth. And in that time, he put up averages of 22 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 4 assists on 45% shooting. Again, LeBron loses in the aspect of regular season games played. But when looking at the level of production while they were on the court, it's not really that close. Even if you adjust for the statistical inflation of the different eras, LeBron would still easily keep his edge in overall production. Therefore, I'm ranking him ahead of Karl Malone as well. Lastly, let's take a look at Kareem Abdul-Jabbar at the age of 38. It was the 1984 to 85 season, and he started in 79 regular season games as his Lakers secured the #1 seed in the Western Conference. On the year, Kareem put up 22 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 assists on 60% shooting from the field. Once again, LeBron has a significant edge in terms of regular season production, but Kareem still has plenty of ammunition in this argument. In the 1985 playoffs, the Lakers went on a championship run through the postseason, with Kareem being the team's leading scorer throughout. And in the NBA Finals specifically, the captain averaged about 26 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, and 1.5 blocks on 60% shooting. Without Kareem's clutch performance on the game's biggest stage, the Lakers likely don't defeat the Boston Celtics to win the NBA championship. Because of his greatness in the finals, he was rewarded with a Finals MVP, making him easily the oldest Finals MVP in NBA history. So in conclusion, LeBron was the greatest player in his 20th season, but he was not the greatest player ever at the age of 38, as Kareem naturally takes my top spot thanks to his postseason dominance. So now that we've addressed LeBron's standing based on what he did last season, what does he have to do this upcoming season in order to be the greatest at season 21 and at age 39? Well, especially in the case of season 21, the bar is set very, very low for LeBron James. Only 5 players in NBA history have played 21 seasons in the league, and LeBron will become the 6th. Of those 5 players, none of them earned an All-NBA selection. Dirk Nowitzki was the only player who was an NBA All-Star, but that was more like a Lifetime Achievement Award rather than an actual indicator of his performance. And none of those 5 players averaged at least 8 points per game. So basically, unless LeBron has a major injury in the preseason, or the greatest season-to-season decline in NBA history, he'll easily become the greatest player ever as season 21. On the other hand, the best player at age 39 is a little more competitive, but still very attainable. He'll have to do better than Jordan's first season in Washington, which was initially quite impressive, as Jordan appeared to be leading his team to the playoffs and was just starting to earn his way into the MVP conversation. But once MJ tore his meniscus nearly 50 games into the regular season, Jordan's production fell off, and they eventually had to shut him down for the season. Karl Malone once again is in the mix, as he played 81 games at the age of 39, and averaged about 20 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists on 46% shooting. Kareem is once again in the picture as well, as he played 79 games and put up about 23 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists on 56% shooting. Ultimately, if LeBron can stay relatively healthy in this upcoming basketball season, I assume he'll be the greatest ever at year 21 and at the age of 39, but that still remains to be seen. So what do you guys think? Is LeBron the greatest at his age, and is he simply the greatest player of all time? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments section below. Let's start by looking at the first of 4 questions, and that's if LeBron is the greatest scorer of all time. He certainly has consistency on his side, as LeBron has averaged at least 25 points per game in the last 18 straight seasons. With that being said, peak scoring is not really in his favor, as LeBron only has 1 scoring title to his name compared to Michael Jordan's 10 and Wilt Chamberlain's 7. LeBron is now higher than both Jordan and Chamberlain on the all-time scoring list, but before you proclaim him a better scorer for that, consider this. I would not call Vince Carter a better scorer than guys like Jerry West, Allen Iverson, Dwayne Wade, Elgin Baylor, George Gervin, Larry Bird, and Steph Curry. But the reality is, as things currently stand, Vince Carter is ahead of all of those guys on the NBA's all-time scoring list. The reason for this is obvious. It's because of Carter's longevity. With more seasons played, he was able to accumulate more points than these other scoring legends. But in their heyday, there was no question that most of these guys were more capable and explosive scorers than Carter. For goodness sake, even someone like Jason Terry finished with more points than guys like Isaiah Thomas, Tracy McGrady, and Julius Erving. But the point of this isn't simply to take a dump on longevity, but rather that longevity and being the greatest scorer are 2 completely separate things. After all, very few people were calling Kareem Abdul-Jabbar the greatest scorer of all time, even though he's the game's all-time leader. But now, suddenly when LeBron is taking that mantle, many of his fans want to call him the greatest scorer. To be honest, the bias is almost unbearable at times. LeBron playing at a superstar level for 20 straight seasons is something that I can confidently say no other player has ever done before. That doesn't make him the greatest scorer ever in my opinion, but it might just make him the most athletically gifted player to ever live. This consistent, durable greatness is a once-in-a-lifetime type of thing that deserves its own impressive title. I would personally just make sure it's the correct title. So maybe he's not the game's greatest scorer, but does this now make him the greatest player of all time? Well, it depends on how you look at it. In my personal opinion, LeBron is not suddenly the GOAT because of this achievement, because like the greatest scorer discussion, peak performance is something that matters greatly to my rankings. And in that case, Jordan still has a solid edge on LeBron. MJ has more championships, more finals MVPs, more MVPs, more scoring titles, and more all-defense team selections in significantly less time. When it comes to peak performance, LeBron doesn't even threaten Jordan. But with that being said, when you look at the overall numbers and the complete totality of LeBron's long-lasting career, there is an argument to be made that he's had the greatest career of all time. He's already the game's all-time leading playoff scorer, and it's not even close. Along with that, he'll finish his career with around 20 All-NBA selections and 20 All-Star selections, which would both be the most of all time. Again, in my opinion, this gives LeBron a solid argument for the greatest career of all time, but it doesn't make him my greatest player. If that sounds crazy, look at how consistent this logic remains when we look at sports as a whole. In the NFL, it's usually guys like Jim Brown, Walter Payton, and Barry Sanders who are recognized as the greatest running backs in NFL history. Yet it's Emmitt Smith who is the all-time leader in both rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. Several baseball players have higher career totals, but it's Babe Ruth who's most often seen as the greatest baseball player of all time. You could continue these examples into many other sports and positions, but again, this is just my way of looking at it. If you think the greatest career and the greatest player are interchangeable, then I can't fault you for having that position. That's just not the lens in which I view it. Longevity, although impressive, is something that is becoming more common across all sports. The modern athlete has advantages that players didn't have from previous generations, like modern medicine, modern technology, and advanced training methods. Tennis players used to be considered dinosaurs at the age of 30, but now many of the modern great ones are pushing their early 40s. Same goes for NFL quarterbacks and running backs like Tom Brady and Frank Gore. For the first 65 seasons of the NBA, only a total of 3 players had a career as long as 20 seasons. But in the last decade alone, 8 players have reached that total, and at a rate which is rapidly increasing. Longevity and consistency are obviously LeBron's greatest strengths, which are extremely commendable, but let's also not act like he's the only modern athlete doing it. Now, one other way of looking at this is the question of, is LeBron now the greatest athlete in NBA history? With the all-time scoring record and 2 decades straight of elite basketball, I honestly say that he is. LeBron is around 6'9" and 250 pounds. He's built like a tank, and he sprints like a cheetah and jumps like a rabbit. There's been other freakishly gifted athletes, like Wilt Chamberlain for example, who had incredible feats of speed and strength. But Wilt was also nowhere close to LeBron's longevity and was extremely more injury prone than James ever was. When you look at the combination of speed, strength, leaping ability, durability, and longevity, I believe LeBron James has firmly grasped the title of the greatest athlete in NBA history. Over the course of LeBron's 18-year career so far, there have been many incredible performances in the postseason, but most of the time, several games are often selected by fans and analysts as the greatest performance of his career. Among these most commonly are Game 6 of the 2012 Eastern Conference Finals, where he rose to the occasion in a must-win situation and dominated the Boston Celtics with 45 points, 15 rebounds, and 5 assists on ridiculous efficiency. Then of course, there's Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals, where LeBron completed the historic 3-1 comeback over the 73-9 Warriors with a massive triple-double and with arguably the most clutch blocked shot in basketball history. When you ask most basketball fans, and when you look at most lists online, these two are usually the games selected as the greatest performances of LeBron's career. But as great as those two were, I disagree. In my opinion, the greatest performance of LeBron's career came much earlier, in what was a significant step towards his all-time great legacy. If I'm going to have any chance of convincing you, first, I'll need to paint the picture of that time frame, and I'll need to break down the events that took place. The year is 2007. LeBron James was entering his 4th season in the NBA as only a 21-year-old player. Although we could already see much of LeBron's potential, he was still yet to have a signature moment in the postseason, and most people in the NBA community thought the Cavs were years away from being title contenders. After all, the most frequent starting 5 for the Cavs that season was LeBron James, Larry Hughes, Eric Snow, Drew Gooden, and Zydrunas Ilgauskas. not your typical championship supporting cast. Despite the lack of superstar support, the young LeBron still led his Cavaliers to a 50-32 record and the second seed in the Eastern Conference. Throughout the regular season, LeBron averaged 27.6 points, 6 assists, and 6.7 rebounds on 47.6% shooting. Finishing second through the regular season with that supporting cast was an incredible accomplishment by itself, but LeBron's legendary moment was still ahead of him. He dominated the first round against Gilbert Arenas and the Washington Wizards, sweeping them in 4 games. In the second round, the Cavs defeated a more talented New Jersey Nets team in 6 games, who were led by Jason Kidd, Vince Carter, and Richard Jefferson. That's as far as anyone expected these Cavs to go, because waiting for them in the Eastern Conference Finals were the heavily favored Detroit Pistons, a team who had finished with the best record in the East for the past 2 seasons and had made the conference finals for 5 straight seasons. Detroit was rich with talent, led by former Finals MVP Chauncey Billups, and he had help from other All-Stars like Richard Hamilton, Rasheed Wallace, and Tayshaun Prince. Simply put, these Detroit Pistons were the reigning power in the Eastern Conference. They were experienced, proven, and battle-tested. Again, no one outside of Cleveland actually expected this inexperienced Cavs team to prevail over the Pistons. But after 4 hard-fought close games, the series was tied at 2 games apiece, with the series moving back to Detroit, where the pivotal 5th game was about to take place. The game continued with the trend of the series. It was a close and hard-fought game throughout. Many players on both sides were contributing. That is, until the final 3 minutes of the 4th quarter, and from this point on, it would be all LeBron James for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He was only 22 years old at this point, and he was taking over offensively in a way that we've never seen before. The young LeBron was hitting basically every kind of shot on the court, from poster dunks to highly contested jumpers. He displayed one of the most clutch, unstoppable offensive onslaughts of all time, dragging his Cavs through the final minutes of the 4th quarter, through the first overtime, and through the second overtime. After yet another clutch 3 to tie the game with just over a minute remaining, Steve Kerr, who was calling the game and was a longtime teammate of Michael Jordan, said that "This is unbelievable. This is Jordan-esque." And then, with the ball in his hands with only seconds remaining, LeBron drove through the heart of the Pistons' elite defense and scored the game-winning basket, capping off his legendary night in a 109-107 victory. He finished the game with 48 points, 9 rebounds, and 7 assists. From the final 2 minutes and 48 seconds of the 4th quarter to the end of the second overtime, LeBron was the only Cavalier who scored, incredibly dropping the final 25 points for his team. During that stretch, he shot 11 of 13 from the field, while the rest of the Cavaliers were a combined 0 of 6 from the field with several turnovers. LeBron is known to dominate games in various ways, with his scoring in combination with his facilitating and rebounding. But rarely do we see LeBron take over a game completely offensively. Sure, Steve Kerr called it Jordan-esque, but the truth is, his 25 straight points to close out a playoff game is something that Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Larry Bird, and basically no other great has ever done. And again, this came from a 22-year-old to close out the most important game of his life up to that point, as he was dethroning that era's dominant team of the conference. If you look up the definition of the word carrying, a photo of this game should come up. With this iconic Game 5 performance, LeBron single-handedly took the momentum of the series, and the Cavs easily closed out the Pistons in the 6th game, and LeBron made his first of 10 NBA Finals appearances. I think some of the other great performances are often selected as LeBron's best simply because they were more recent, and more young fans were able to witness it. Plus, more people in general were paying attention to LeBron's legacy at that point. But unlike many of LeBron's young fans today, I vividly remember Game 5 in 2007 and was completely awestruck by what I was watching. To me, not only was this game the most impressive I've seen from him, but I believe it was also the most meaningful. It's one thing to witness the triumphal, climactic moments of a player's career, but it's something else entirely to witness the origin story. This was the beginning of the LeBron James we know today. This was the moment where I knew as a young fan that the league would soon be owned by LeBron. This was the moment I realized that this young man may actually become better than Kobe, that he's every bit as good as people hyped him up to be, and that his nickname the King is very well deserved. So what do you guys think? Which performance from LeBron James was the greatest of his career? Let me know in the comments section below. I've heard the criticism over and over again that LeBron is allegedly too soft to play in the NFL, but I firmly disagree with that notion. People want to bring up that James flops in the NBA, but he doesn't do that because he's weak or soft. But he literally does it to gain an advantage by enticing the refs to blow the whistle. This is not an applicable aspect to his toughness in the NFL. At his peak, LeBron was a strong 6 foot 9 inches tall and 260 pounds, who had the speed to hang with the very best. But specifically, in his sophomore year of high school, LeBron played wide receiver and was named first team All-State. And in his junior year, he helped get his team to the state semifinals. Obviously, by the end of his high school days, his focus was completely on the game of basketball. But that wouldn't be the end of his connections to the game of football. During his days as a pro basketball player, NFL organizations like the Cleveland Browns and the Dallas Cowboys have expressed interest in acquiring LeBron. I would have loved to have witnessed that. Considering how a lot of great tight ends in the past, like Antonio Gates, Jimmy Graham, and Tony Gonzalez, were also decent basketball players, I think it would have been cool to see LeBron take a stab at the tight end position. But unfortunately, LeBron never decided to go through with it. The Lakers have now eliminated the Miami Heat, securing their 17th title in franchise history, tying them for first all-time in NBA championships. And along with that, LeBron has now secured his 4th championship ring in an already hotly debated GOAT conversation between him and Jordan. So the immediate question is, how does this change things? If you've followed my channel for very long at all, you've probably seen me compare these two greats in my GOAT series, in which my conclusion was that Michael was still the greatest player of all time. But with this recent championship, LeBron has now won 4 NBA championships, 4 finals MVPs, and has led 3 different franchises to a championship which no other player has ever done before. If you're a Jordan fan, you've got to admit that at the very least, he's making the conversation more and more interesting with each passing season. Many of the basic comparisons haven't changed much. Jordan still has the edge in championships, finals MVPs, and league MVPs. When it comes to scoring, Jordan is clearly better with his distant record of 10 straight scoring titles to LeBron's 1. Jordan also has the highest scoring average in NBA history, and by far the highest playoff scoring average in NBA history. Of course, if you're arguing in favor of LeBron on the offensive end, it's not just about scoring, but it's about how he impacts the game as a serious dual threat. LeBron's averaged 2 more assists per game over his career than Jordan did, and when it comes to players of his stature, James is clearly one of the greatest passers and floor generals the game has ever seen. Rebounding is a slight edge to LeBron, which some of that comes with his position on the court. Defensively, Jordan has always had a massive edge and continues to have a massive edge. MJ has 9 first-team all-defense appearances, and LeBron has 5. Jordan won the Defensive Player of the Year in 1988, which is an award LeBron has never won, although you could argue that he should have, especially in 2013. Contrary to popular belief, Jordan actually averaged more blocks than LeBron James, despite being 3 inches shorter and about 50 pounds lighter, as MJ was arguably the greatest shot-blocking guard of all time. MJ also averaged significantly more steals, and almost everyone recognizes Jordan as the better on-ball defender. Now, of course, there's many narratives that come with this debate, and the reason I don't dwell on them in this debate is because they're very subjective. They're based on interpretation, and honestly, I think many of them are stupid, on both sides. People say that Jordan didn't start winning until Pippen showed up, which is true, but he hadn't played very long up to that point. And I would argue that he didn't have adequate help until Pippen developed. In the 80s, no one in their right mind expected a solo Jordan show to beat a team of 3 or 4 All-Stars and a deep bench like the Celtics and Pistons had. Then for LeBron, you have the 3-6, which is now a 4-6 finals record. But I hate this one too, because how the hell are you going to take LeBron dragging Larry Hughes and Boobie Gibson to the finals in 2007, a place where they had no business being, and turn that into a negative? If you do that, then I can't help but think that you're just showing your bias. So if you want to argue about all the different narratives that you can't quantify, or back with any statistical analysis, well then we can have that conversation, but just know that we'll be arguing forever because there's basically no definitive answer. I prefer much more to look at the facts that can't be disputed and then formulate the argument from there. Now earlier, I talked about how averages and accolades still significantly favor Jordan, but for LeBron, it's much more about his career totals, and that's a testament to his longevity, his consistency, his good health, and his commitment to staying in elite shape. Thanks to his longevity, he's ahead of Jordan on the all-time scoring list. He's already the NBA playoffs all-time leading scorer, along with many other playoff statistics that are not pictured on the screen. He's miles ahead of Jordan in assists and rebounds. As things currently stand, in my opinion, LeBron is still not the greatest player of all time, but he will have the greatest career of all time. Based on the way LeBron is performing at this age and how much he appears to have left in the tank, barring a major injury, his complete resume will stand alone. So with that being said, I do think there is a possible universe where LeBron ends up with all of these crazy career totals, and he definitively has the greatest career of all time. But I still recognize Michael Jordan as the greatest player of all time. If by the end of his career, LeBron's complete resume leads you to say that his greatest career also makes him the greatest player of all time, then I certainly won't fault you for it. The fact that people try and turn this incredibly impressive achievement into a form of criticism is mind-boggling to me. LeBron James has 4 NBA championship rings and made it all the way to the NBA Finals on 10 different occasions, and with a total of 3 different franchises. As amazing as that sounds, it's the 4 and 6 part that gets regurgitated over and over again. The criticism implies that if LeBron only made it to the NBA Finals 4 times in his career and won all 4 times, that would be more impressive than his total of 10 appearances with 4 championships. Essentially, they're critiquing LeBron for making it too deep into the playoffs on 6 occasions, which is obviously ridiculous when you look at it objectively. The best example of why that critique is absurd is because of the 2007 postseason. At that point in LeBron's young career, he was only 22 years old, and he was leading the Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals against the first-seeded Detroit Pistons. The Pistons were a team with championship experience and several All-Stars on their roster. This was the Pistons' 5th straight season where they had made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and they were the heavy favorites heading into this series. What Detroit wasn't ready for was a young LeBron James who would perform in a way that was reminiscent of a prime Michael Jordan. In Game 5 especially, LeBron went absolutely nuts as he dropped 48 points, 9 rebounds, and 7 assists on 54.5% shooting, leading his Cavs in overtime to a 2-point victory. To say that James carried his team to victory would be a massive understatement, as LeBron scored the final 25 points for the Cleveland Cavaliers. In my opinion, this is one of the top 3 greatest playoff performances in NBA history, and it was done by a kid who wasn't even old enough to rent a car in most cases. The Cavaliers absolutely had no business beating the far more experienced Detroit Pistons that series, but thanks to LeBron's legendary performance, the Cavs were able to achieve the unthinkable. Now imagine using this performance as a criticism against LeBron's legacy. Sounds crazy, but that's exactly what people are doing when they mention the 4-6 narrative. Because LeBron's Cavs went on to lose in the NBA Finals against the dynastic San Antonio Spurs. By the logic of the 4-6 critique, it would have been better for his legacy if LeBron never dropped those 48 points, he never scored the Cavs' final 25, and instead just laid over while the Pistons routed them out of the playoffs. Of course, that's stupid. So even if you're a Jordan guy, don't make this disingenuous critique and punish a player for something that should be appreciated. In my opinion, the most underrated aspect of LeBron's game is certainly his clutch gene. I'm not just talking about buzzer beaters or one-possession shots in the final 30 seconds, but I'm talking about playoff situations where everything was on the line and showing up in a big way. Of course, LeBron has the awful 2011 Finals on his resume, but far too many people act like his career ended then and there. Since then, LeBron has been constantly dominating meaningful games in the postseason. This is what he averaged in the 2011 Finals, and in his 45 NBA Finals games since then, these are the numbers he's averaged, as he's nearly been an efficient and consistent 30-point triple-double on the game's biggest stage. Throughout his career, LeBron has played a total of 8 Game 7s, And in those games, he's averaged 34.9 points, 9.9 rebounds, and 5.6 assists on 48.7% shooting. With a minimum of 3 Game 7s played, that is the highest Game 7 scoring average in NBA history. In this modern day, if you're still saying that LeBron isn't a clutch player, then someone needs to yank you out of the year 2011. Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, widely recognized as the 2 greatest players since the turn of the millennium. Despite being the greatest players, these two never really shared a rivalry as they played in separate conferences and unfortunately never met up in the NBA Finals. But with that being said, there was one special week of NBA history where these 2 MVP candidates were competing to display the greatest show at the basketball mecca, Madison Square Garden. So who would be crowned the King of New York, LeBron or Kobe? To get an answer to that, let's take a dive back into this week in history. It's February 2nd, 2009, and the 37-9 Lakers are set to square off with the 21-25 Knicks, who were actually riding high on a 3-game winning streak. Although Kobe and the Lakers were enjoying the best record in the Western Conference, there was also a very somber mood to this team, as their previous game was against the Memphis Grizzlies, and in that contest, Kobe fell on Andrew Bynum's leg, severely injuring the star center, which was obviously a massive blow to the Lakers' championship hopes. After the loss to the Celtics in the previous NBA Finals, Kobe spoke about how Andrew's rebounding and rim protection was missed, and likely played a part in the Lakers losing the series. So to then see Bynum go down again almost felt as if we were seeing the Lakers' championship hopes go up in flames once again, and you could see it on the Mamba's face. The morning of this matchup with the Knicks, news broke to the Lakers that Bynum had suffered a torn MCL and was likely to miss the rest of the season. With this massive blow to their confidence and psyche, Kobe took it upon himself as a leader to re-energize his teammates and convince them that come hell or high water, they're still winning this championship. Leading up to tip-off, Kobe was laser-focused and barely spoke to anyone, and that level of concentration would pay off on the court. Kobe came out hot and seemingly couldn't miss anything. A desperate New York squad threw all kinds of different defenders at him, like Quentin Richardson, Wilson Chandler, and even David Lee took some shots at him as well. But it didn't matter, the result was the same each time. No one was stopping the Mamba on a mission this night. The shots he was hitting had an insane degree of difficulty that was leaving the crowd oohing and awing. As the game was beginning to get out of hand, the New York crowd had lost interest in the Knicks' chances to win the game, and instead, they were cheering on Kobe as he was making history. With his 56th point, he became the highest scoring road player in the history of Madison Square Garden, eclipsing Michael Jordan's iconic double nickel game. When Kobe scored his 61st point, he became the highest scoring player in Madison Square Garden history, surpassing Bernard King's 60-point performance in 1984. As a triumphant Kobe went to the bench, he was showered with MVP chants from an appreciative New York crowd, which only a few players can ever say they've accomplished. On the evening, Kobe finished with 61 points and 3 assists on 76.6 true shooting percentage, and the Lakers won the game 126-117. The Knicks didn't have very long to mourn their embarrassing defeat, because their very next game was just 2 nights later against LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. LeBron had his own interesting story heading into this New York matchup. James had a massive free agency decision to make in the foreseeable future, and at the time, the New York Knicks appeared to be the favorite to land the king, and for good reasons. LeBron was doing just about as much flirting with the Knicks organization that he could have without getting fined for tampering. He was famously known to be a New York Yankees fan, even going as far as wearing their merchandise to a Cleveland Indians game. LeBron had also been very vocal about the fact that Madison Square Garden was his favorite place to play basketball. So knowing these things, anytime LeBron played at MSG, it was a must-see event, as you expected to see the best from an auditioning LeBron. But having this matchup come so shortly after Kobe Bryant's record-breaking performance, we all knew that LeBron had a little extra motivation on this night. When the game began, LeBron was doing just about everything on the court, but you could also tell that his mindset was just a little different, as he was extremely aggressive offensively and was quick to let it fly from the perimeter, which was not his usual style at this point in his career. With that being said, LeBron was scorching hot and was destroying many of the same defenders that Kobe lit up just a couple nights earlier. To end the first quarter, LeBron hit a jumper at the buzzer, which gave him more points through the first quarter than Kobe had through his, and the New York crowd knew then that they were in for another long night. As the game continued, LeBron didn't let up with his efficient sniping. But whenever he wasn't scoring, he was also controlling the game as the floor general, finding his perimeter shooters whenever he drew most of the attention. Again, there wasn't much the Knicks could do to slow the superstar down, and as the game was approaching its end, LeBron was drawing close to history of his own. With this rebound in the final few seconds, LeBron secured his 10th board, which gave him the historic triple-double. He finished the game with 52 points, 11 assists, and 10 rebounds on 62.9 true shooting percentage. At this point, LeBron became only the 5th player in NBA history to ever achieve a 50-point triple-double, and this was also the only one to ever take place in Madison Square Garden. Unfortunately, these historic records for LeBron only lasted about 2 days, because the NBA went back and reviewed LeBron's 9th rebound, which he got with only 39 seconds left in the game, and they ultimately decided to take it away and credit it to his teammate Ben Wallace instead. Sorry for the poor quality, but this is the best version of the rebound that I can find. Personally, I don't see how they're justified in taking this rebound away from LeBron, considering how Wallace never seemed to have fully secured the loose ball before LeBron grabs hold of it. Regardless of how we personally feel about it, LeBron's official stat line now stands as 52 points, 11 assists, and 9 rebounds. This week of basketball should be remembered as one of the greatest of NBA history, as it not only featured 2 all-time great performances, but it was also about the incredible stories revolving around these performances. Kobe's leadership would become fruitful as his Lakers would go on to win the NBA championship regardless of the devastating Andrew Bynum injury. And as for LeBron, he would later beat out Kobe Bryant for the league MVP award, and he wouldn't go on to join the Knicks after all, but instead disappointed both New York and Cleveland fans when he famously decided to take his talents to South Beach. Unfortunately, we never got the rivalry we wanted so badly between these two legends, but at the very least, this week in New York was a small highlight of the greats competing against one another for the title of the King of New York. So what do you guys think? Whose performance was greater? Kobe's more efficient 61 points, or LeBron's all-around impressive near triple-double? Let me know in the comments section below. The 2012 to 2013 Miami Heat, the championship apex of the Big Three super team. It's easy to simply remember this team for the dominance of their 3 stars, but in this season especially, they were so much more than just that. They had depth, shooting, a great coach, and a defensive mindset that made them difficult on both ends of the court. Starting at the point guard position was the 6'2" Mario Chalmers. He certainly wasn't one of the stars that made this group a super team, but he was a key piece nonetheless, as he put up over 8 points, 3 assists, and 1.5 steals on 43% shooting in 26 minutes per game. He was also one of their reliable floor spreaders, as he had a career year shooting 40.9% from three-point range. At the shooting guard spot was the dynamic Dwayne Wade, who wasn't quite in his prime anymore, but was still one of the best at his position, as he averaged about 21, 5, 5, and 2 steals on 52.1% shooting. Wade, as usual, was elite on both sides of the basketball, as he was well above league average in steals and blocks among guards. Starting at small forward was arguably the greatest version of LeBron James we've ever seen in an obvious MVP campaign. At this point in his career, he had the perfect blend of experience, maturation, athleticism, and confidence, as he was now the clear leader of this team. This was also a career year on the defensive end of the floor, as he finished 2nd overall in the Defensive Player of the Year race, and many think he should have won the award this year over the Grizzlies' Marc Gasol. LeBron put up his typical stat line of 26.8 points, 8 rebounds, 7.3 assists, and 1.7 steals on an unbelievable 56.5% shooting. That level of efficiency from the field is impressive for a center, but for a small forward, it's basically unheard of. This was also the best year of his career from three-point range, as he shot an elite 40.6% from that distance. It was an all-time great season in terms of superstar efficiency. At one point, LeBron had 6 straight games where he scored at least 30 points while shooting at least 60% from the field. That's the longest streak in NBA history. Quality shot selection and efficiency wasn't just a trait from LeBron this season, but it pretty much summed up the team as a whole, and all three of their superstars had their best or their second best season in terms of efficiency. That's one of the luxuries of playing alongside of other superstars. You get much cleaner looks. Starting at power forward was the 6'8" Udonis Haslem, who certainly wasn't putting up monstrous stats, but he did provide toughness and veteran leadership. As I mentioned earlier, this Heat team was very deep, and with Haslem's 19 minutes per game, he was typically one of the first guys to head to the bench. More on the bench unit in a moment. But starting at center was the 6'11" Chris Bosh, who tended to be in the shadow of LeBron and Wade, but his contribution was vital to their success, as he put up 16.6 points, 6.8 rebounds, and 1.4 blocks on a career-best 53.5% from the field. One of the first players to come off the bench was the 37-year-old Ray Allen, who was enjoying his first season with Miami. Even in his old age, he was still one of the greatest threats among role players, as he led everyone outside of the Big Three in scoring, with numbers of 10.9 points, 2.7 assists, and 1.7 rebounds on 41.9% shooting. He was doing his usual thing from three-point range, as he shot 41.9% from that distance. Believe it or not, he actually wasn't the team's best three-point shooter throughout the regular season though. That honor would go to the 6'8" small forward Shane Battier, who averaged about the same amount of minutes as Allen, but also shot more three-point attempts on 43% from three-point range. Rounding out the roster were quality pieces like Norris Cole, Chris Birdman Anderson, Mike Miller, and Rashard Lewis. With a multitude of quality wings on this team, the 2013 Miami Heat became famous for using what they called positionless basketball, where they would use an unorthodox group of players, which traditionally might not seem like a very successful method, but they were quick to prove that wrong, and in a major way. During one large stretch of the season, the team got so hot that they went on an absolutely historic winning streak, as everyone was hitting on all cylinders. Miami won 27 straight regular season games, which is the second longest streak of all time, behind the 1972 Lakers, who won 33 straight, and who we covered earlier in this series. To put 27 straight games in perspective, that means Miami went from February 3rd to March 26th without losing a single game. One strong advantage about this team that's worth mentioning is how their core was relatively young, and overall they had great stamina and endurance. One good way to measure that is how well the team does on the second night of back-to-backs, and this team was literally the greatest ever in that area. Throughout the regular season, on the second night of back-to-backs, they had a record of 15-1, which is tied for the best record in NBA history. When we look back on the glory days of this team, it's easy to simply look at the slashers in Dwayne Wade and LeBron James, but collectively, they were absolutely dangerous from the perimeter, as the Heat had 5 guys who shot at least 3 three-point attempts per game while shooting at least 40% from that distance, which was LeBron, Mario Chalmers, Ray Allen, Shane Battier, and Mike Miller. Looking at the results of this group over the 2013 season, we see that the Heat finished with a league-best 66-win season. They statistically had the 9th best defense and the 2nd best offense overall that season. They beat teams by an average of 7.8 points over the course of the year. They went through the playoffs with a 16-7 record on their way to the championship, and they had that season's MVP, who was LeBron James. Through the East playoffs, they swept the Milwaukee Bucks in the first round, comfortably dismantled the Bulls in the second round, and then eliminated the Pacers in the East Finals in 7 games. The NBA Finals were an absolute classic, which included maybe the most clutch shot in basketball history when Ray Allen did what he was brought on to do and hit a big 3 to extend the series, before Miami eventually won in the 7th game. If San Antonio had won, then their 2013 squad may have been in the series as well, but ultimately Miami came out on top and solidified their place among the great teams of basketball lore. If you're looking for a GOAT team candidate with young, athletic star power, positionless basketball, an array of shooters, a defensive-minded team, and one of the greatest players of all time at the very height of his powers, then the 2013 Heat may be the team you're looking for, as they have a somewhat underrated case for the title of greatest team in NBA history. Is this team the best of the best? If not, who could beat them in a 7-game series? Let me know in the comments below.
Well, the FIBA Games just recently concluded, and no one is currently feeling more vindicated than world champion sprinter Noah Lyles. Germany took home the gold and now have full authorization to call themselves world champions, which they're doing quite a bit. On the other hand, Team USA finished the FIBA Games with a mediocre 5-3 record, and didn't win a single medal, which I'm not gonna lie, is an embarrassment to our country, and as a lifelong American basketball fan, I'm still not over it. Well, now the United States is mad, and understandably, the best basketball players in the US are determined to redeem themselves and restore the red, white, and blue to the top of the basketball world. At the time I'm writing this script, many of the best NBA players have unofficially committed to representing the US in the 2024 Olympic Games. Those players include LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Anthony Davis, Jason Tatum, Damian Lillard, Kyrie Irving, Devin Booker, Anthony Edwards, Bam Adebayo, Draymond Green, and De'Aaron Fox. Apparently, Chris Paul has also expressed interest in joining the team. But I'm not gonna lie, considering how they already have 12 other elite players committed, he might struggle to get a roster spot. In a matter of minutes, people started calling this hypothetical USA team the Avengers. And I gotta be honest, I'm hyped as heck to see it. Although I was frustrated by the lack of superstar turnout for the USA team in the FIBA competition, I am rather pleased to see that so many of our USA players have enough pride that they'll sacrifice their summer of relaxation time to put the US back on the mountaintop. Now, as an older basketball fan, I gotta say, I love seeing so many young basketball fans on social media getting excited and being filled with American pride for the response to these FIBA games. But here's the funny part that many people seem to be missing. This is nothing new for USA basketball. This is literally history repeating itself, as this has become a main theme of our country when it comes to the international competition. Let me explain with a bit of a history lesson. The Basketball Olympics officially began in 1936, and from that point until 1968, the US won the gold medal in all 7 Olympic events between those years. Simply put, the US had an absolute stranglehold on the game of basketball for nearly 4 decades. As time went on, the rest of the world continued to improve, and although the US was still usually the gold medal winners, they no longer looked untouchable when compared to the rest of the competition. And then, in the 1988 Olympics, the US received a wake-up call, as the Soviet Union defeated the United States in the gold medal game, and this was officially the beginning of the historical trend for USA basketball. The American competition was infuriated by the loss, to such an extent that they completely changed their approach to Olympic basketball. Up until that bronze medal in 1988, the US had never let their NBA players participate in the Olympic Games, but instead, they were being represented by the best collegiate players in the country. Well, all of that quickly changed as the US was determined to send a message to the world, and assembled the 1992 Dream Team for the Barcelona Games. You guys know how this went. The Dream Team completely destroyed the competition, going undefeated in Barcelona and winning by an average of roughly 44 points per game. The US won the Olympic gold in 1996 and then won it again in the year 2000. But by that point, it was clear that the American NBA players were starting to get complacent, as the talent on the 2000 team wasn't quite as stacked as the previous 96 and 92 teams. By 2004, their arrogance had caught up to them, as they only went 5-3 in Athens, Greece, finishing those Olympic Games with an embarrassing bronze medal. And once again, the US competitors were angry and decided to start taking things seriously once again. In 2008, they had assembled the Redeem Team, famously led by the recently recruited Kobe Bryant, who was participating in Olympic competition for the first time in his basketball career. Although they executed their vengeance in Beijing by winning the gold medal, they didn't quite dominate the competition to the same extent that they did in 1992, which once again provided more evidence that the gap was closing between the US and the rest of the world. The US won the gold in 2012 and in 2016, but again, it was evident that the sense of urgency was wearing off and complacency was setting in, as the 2016 team wasn't nearly as stacked as the 12 and 08 squads. Although the US won the gold in 2020, they also haven't won a FIBA Games tournament since 2014. And after this most recent failure to finish on the podium, the American NBA players have apparently had enough, as we are once again responding with the A-Team, with vengeance on the mind. On one hand, it's very exciting to see the cycle repeating itself as the US Super Team is assembling once again. But it's also quite frustrating because we have to be knocked off the mountaintop in order for us to take international play serious enough to bust out the A-Team. I fully expect this cycle to continue where the US dominates, then gets complacent, they lose as a result, then they get angry, and then the cycle starts over again. But what I'm worried about is that this cycle won't continue forever. With the names who are unofficially committed to competing in 2024, I have a very hard time not seeing the US win the gold in the 2024 Olympics. But the day is coming, whether it's 10 years from now or 20 years from now, where the US gets angry at the previous defeat and responds with their team of vengeance, and even that team fails. When that day comes, it will certainly be a humbling day for United States basketball, and maybe that will be the kind of drastic event that it takes for the cycle to officially be broken. I love my country, and I firmly believe that at full strength, we're better than any other country at the game of basketball. But remember, the US was pretty much at full strength in 2008, and that gold medal game went down to the wire, regardless of the fact that the US was led by all-time greats like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Dwayne Wade. And just how much has the rest of the world improved in the last 15 years? Again, we gotta stop taking the international competition for granted, because all of these assumptions that will come out victorious as long as we're serious is eventually gonna backfire. With that being said, I doubt it will be in 2024, because this hypothetical team is absolutely stacked, and not just from the perspective of talent alone. But I actually love the way the playstyles complement one another, as KD can blend in with just about any roster, and LeBron finding Steph wide open on the perimeter is basically a match made in heaven. With LeBron operating as the floor general, and with an array of shooters like Steph, Damian Lillard, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker, they will be absolutely raining threes on the opposing countries at an extremely efficient rate. And then, with interior defenders like Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo, and Draymond Green, there will be basically zero easy baskets in the painted area for the rest of the world. Then you even have to factor in the player progression for the younger stars on the squad, as Jason Tatum and Anthony Edwards will likely be even better by the time these Olympic Games roll around. There should also be a high level of chemistry with this group, as there is a lot of familiarity between all the different teammates. Steph, Durant, and Draymond know extremely well what it's like to play with one another. LeBron and Kyrie have that familiarity, and obviously so do AD and LeBron as well. If these quote Avengers assemble as expected, then this will be the first USA team since 2012 that can at least somewhat match up to the level of talent of the original Dream Team. But now, I'm starting to get ahead of myself. Now I want to hear your perspective on things. Would this hypothetical USA team be strong enough to challenge the 2008 Redeem Team or the 1992 Dream Team? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching as always. Make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.